In this session, we're going to talk about the importance of allowing users to interact with the application by editing and submitting data. We'll show you how you can display a single record and how we can also allow users to edit information in a screen using forms and input widgets. We will introduce these widgets and see how they work to build detail screens. Finally, we'll show you how the data submitted by the user is stored in the scope of the screen and how we can submit data. Most of the applications do not simply display data to the end users. It's very common for users to have input forms to fill with some data or even edit some existing data. This data can have different formats and different data types. We can have input fields where we can just type text or a number, but also a list of options to choose from or a date picker. OutSystems offers multiple input widgets that allow you to develop your screens in a way that enables all these possible interactions. One of the most common use cases is to have a screen that displays and allows editing or creating a record, such as an order, a product, or a customer. For that, we can create a detail screen. A detail screen usually consists of a form with all the input widgets that the end user will use to interact and change the data at will. So, a common use case for a detail screen has an aggregate to fetch the data from the database. The data fetched is uniquely identified by the input parameter of the screen, which is used in the aggregate to filter the query. And then we have a form with multiple input widgets, where each input is bound to an attribute returned by the aggregate. There are multiple input widgets we can use. Some of the input widgets are designed for specific scenarios and data types. First, there are the input and text area widgets. The input widget allows the user to type text and numbers or pick dates. The text area is a multi-line field that expects text, which can be useful for larger chunks of text, such as descriptions. As for small number of options, we have the radio group and the button group. Both work very similarly. The radio group contains a set of radio buttons, whereas the button group contains buttons. Users can choose an option from a small number of possibilities by selecting a radio button or button item. The several options are defined through radio button or button group items. There are also widgets to represent binary options, such as yes or no, true or false. In OutSystems, we represent that with a variable of a Boolean type. The checkbox is a simple widget that allows a user to check or uncheck an option. The switch has a similar approach, but with a swipe left or right behavior to select or unselect an option. The dropdown also allows the user to select from a list of choices. With the dropdown, a user can easily select an option from a large set of records. A screen will typically have all these widgets we talked about grouped so that the data can be presented or edited together. The form widget is precisely the widget that groups input widgets. The form helps on the process of submitting the data to the application and is useful to validate all the data within the form submitted by the user as a whole. So where is the data in each input field stored? Every input widget has a variable property. Any value that an end user adds or selects in an input field will be saved in the variable. Similarly, whatever value displayed by the input will be stored in the variable. The variable needs to be in the scope of the screen and can be a screen input parameter, local variable, or an attribute of the source entity of an aggregate on the screen, which is the example shown here. In addition to the input widgets, we have the label widget. The label helps identify the purpose of each input field. This widget displays static text to describe any of the introduced input fields, which helps the end user to understand which data is expected. The label has a property called input widget that associates the label with the respective field. When this input field is mandatory, the label will automatically display a visual cue to the user. What if we want to save all this data in the database? Or manipulate it with some logic? Well, a form allows other widgets besides the input widgets. Forms can also have links and buttons, among others. If we want to perform some logic over the data, links and buttons are extremely useful since they can trigger a screen action, which has access to everything inside the scope of the screen, including the values in every input field. In this example, we have a button that triggers an action with the logic to create or update a product in the database with data in the input fields of the form.